Amidst the swirling dust of Buffalo, Wyoming Territory, 1878, Genevieve Porter clutched the small bundle to her chest, knowing that the moment she'd been dreading had finally arrived. She needed to tell the truth, no matter the cost. The unforgiving winds of the frontier had battered her spirit, just as they had the weathered buildings that lined the town's main street. But today would be the hardest test of her courage yet. The wagon train had arrived in Buffalo just before sundown, bringing with it a weary collection of settlers seeking new beginnings in the West. Genevieve had been among them, though her journey had begun months earlier, and under circumstances she wished she could forget. At 22 years old, with auburn hair that caught the light of the setting sun and green eyes that had seen too much sorrow, she stepped down from the wagon with careful movements, mindful of the infant in her arms. "Need some help with your things, madam." The voice belonged to Tucker Larson, the town's most respected rancher, and, from what she'd heard during their journey, one of the most eligible bachelors in Johnson County. Genevieve looked up at the tall figure before her. His broad shoulders were silhouetted against the dying light, Stetson tipped at an angle that shadowed his eyes. She'd noticed him riding alongside the wagon train for the past 2 days, guiding them through treacherous mountain passes with a quiet confidence that had caught her attention, despite her determination to keep to herself. "Thank you, Mr. Larson, but I can manage," she replied, shifting the baby in her arms. Tucker's eyes softened as they fell on the sleeping infant. "That's a mighty precious cargo you're carrying. Your husband coming along behind?" the question she'd been dreading. Genevieve swallowed hard. "I'm not married, Mr. Larson." If her admission shocked him, he didn't show it. Instead, he nodded toward the small hotel at the end of the street. "Mrs. Holloway runs the boarding house. She's a good woman, doesn't ask too many questions. I reckon she might have a room for you and your little one." "I appreciate the recommendation," Genevieve said, gratitude washing over her. She'd expected judgment, had steeled herself against the whispers and stares that would inevitably follow a single woman with a baby. But Tucker Larson's kind eyes held no condemnation. The baby stirred in her arms, tiny fingers curling against the blanket. James, she'd named him after her father. 5 months old now, with a tuft of dark hair that didn't match her auburn locks. Every time she looked at him, her heart swelled with love and ached with the weight of her circumstances. "Let me carry your trunk, at least," Tucker insisted, already lifting the worn leather case that contained everything she owned in the world. Buffalo might seem rough around the edges, but there are good people here. As they walked toward the boarding house, Genevieve caught the curious glances of townspeople. A woman sweeping her porch paused mid-stroke, eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of Tucker escorting a young woman with a baby. Genevieve lifted her chin, refusing to bow under the weight of silent judgment. Mrs. Holloway was indeed a good woman, as Tucker had promised. She was a stout, no-nonsense widow with graying hair pulled back into a severe bun, but her eyes were kind as she showed Genevieve to a small room on the second floor. "It's not much," the older woman said, "but it's clean and I keep a quiet house." "It's perfect," Genevieve replied, taking in the narrow bed, plain wooden dresser, and small window that overlooked the main street. "I don't require much, just a safe place for James and me." Mrs. Holloway's gaze softened as she looked at the baby. "He's a handsome little fellow. If you're needing work, the general store might be hiring. Old Mr. Peterson's eyes aren't what they used to be, and he needs someone good with figures." "I was a school teacher back east," Genevieve offered. "I'm quite proficient with arithmetic." Tucker, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, spoke up. "The town's been talking about starting a proper school. We've got enough young'uns now to warrant it. Been using the church for lessons, but only when the circuit preacher isn't in town. Hope flickered within Genevieve's chest. A teaching position would be respectable, something she could build a future upon. That would be ideal. After Tucker and Mrs. Holloway left her to settle in, Genevieve sat on the edge of the bed, cradling James as he began to fuss. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "We'll make our way." But as she gazed down at his face, so innocent and trusting, guilt gnawed at her conscience. The secret she carried was a heavy burden, one she'd have to reveal eventually, but not tonight. Tonight they were safe, and that was enough. The following morning, Genevieve dressed carefully in her best and only good dress, a dark blue cotton with small white dots. She pinned her hair neatly and wrapped James securely in his blanket before heading downstairs to inquire about the general store. Mrs. Holloway was already up, the scent of coffee and fresh bread filling the kitchen. "Sit and have some breakfast before you go," she insisted. "Can't be chasing opportunities on an empty stomach." Genevieve hadn't realized how hungry she was until the plate of eggs and biscuits appeared before her. She ate gratefully while Mrs. Holloway cooed at James, holding him with the practiced ease of a woman who had raised her share of children. "He's a quiet one," Mrs. Holloway observed. "Good disposition." "He has his moments," Genevieve replied with a small smile. "But yes, he's a blessing." After breakfast, with directions to the general store firmly in mind, Genevieve set out. Buffalo was beginning to stir to life. Shopkeepers opening their doors, ranch hands heading to the saloon for coffee before starting their day's work. She felt the stares as she passed, clutching James closer to her chest like a shield. The general store was a large, well-stocked establishment with a wide porch and large windows displaying everything from farming tools to ladies' bonnets. Genevieve took a deep breath and pushed open the door, the bell above jingling to announce her arrival. Mr. Peterson was indeed an elderly man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose. He looked up from his ledger as she entered, his bushy eyebrows rising in surprise. "Good morning," Genevieve said, summoning her courage. "I'm Genevieve Porter. I've just arrived in town, and I heard you might be in need of assistance." The old man studied her for a long moment, his gaze lingering on James. "You any good with numbers?" "Very good," she assured him. "I was a school teacher in Pennsylvania," he grunted, neither impressed nor dismissive. "Can you start today? My eyes can't make out these figures anymore, and my hands aren't steady enough for proper penmanship." Relief washed over her. "Yes, I can start immediately. I'll need to bring my son with me, though." Mr. Peterson shrugged. "As long as he doesn't cry all day and you get the work done, I don't see a problem." He gestured to a small desk near the back of the store. "That'll be your place. 6 days a week, Sundays off. Pay is fair." And just like that, Genevieve had secured employment. She settled at the desk, arranging James in a makeshift bed of blankets beside her, and began the task of organizing Mr. Peterson's chaotic ledgers. The day passed quickly, with a steady stream of customers coming and going. Many were curious about the new woman in town, some openly staring at James, others whispering behind their hands. Genevieve maintained her composure, focusing on her work and answering polite inquiries with brief, pleasant responses. It was late afternoon when the bell jangled again, and Tucker Larson strode in, removing his hat as he entered. His brown hair was tousled, his face tanned from hours in the sun. He nodded to Mr. Peterson before making his way to Genevieve's desk. "I see you found employment," he said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That was quick." "Mr. Peterson was kind enough to hire me on the spot," she replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at Tucker's presence. "I've been asking around about the school situation," Tucker continued. The town council meets next week. I thought you might want to present yourself as a candidate for teacher." Genevieve blinked in surprise. "That's very thoughtful of you, Mr. Larson." "Tucker, please," he corrected. "And it's not just thoughtfulness. We need a proper education for the children around here if Buffalo's going to grow into something more than just another cow town." Mr. Peterson shuffled over, wiping his hands on his apron. "Larson, you need something, or are you just here to distract my new assistant?" Tucker chuckled. "Just being neighborly, Peterson. Need some coffee and flour, though, while I'm here." As Mr. Peterson gathered the items, Tucker leaned closer to Genevieve. "There's a social at the church tomorrow evening. Nothing fancy, just folks getting together for music and conversation. Might be a good way for you to meet people, especially those with school-age children." Genevieve hesitated. The thought of facing the entire town with their questions and judgments was daunting. But if she wanted to establish herself as a potential teacher, she needed to integrate into the community. "That sounds lovely," she said finally. "What time does it begin?" "Around 7. I could escort you and the little one if you'd like." Before she could respond, the bell jangled again, and a striking woman in an expensive dress entered. Her blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate style, and her lips were painted a subtle shade of pink. She zeroed in on Tucker immediately. "Tucker Larson, I've been looking for you," she said, her voice honeyed but with an edge beneath it. "Father says you haven't responded to his offer." Tucker's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Caldwell," he acknowledged with a nod. "I've been busy with the spring branding." Miss Caldwell's eyes flicked to Genevieve, then to James, who had begun to fuss. "I see you've met our new arrival." "This is Miss Porter," Tucker said, his tone formal. "She's working for Mr. Peterson now, and she might be taking over the school." "How interesting," Miss Caldwell replied, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "Well, don't forget about Father's offer. He's not a patient man." With that, she selected a bolt of fabric from a nearby shelf and carried it to the counter. Tucker turned back to Genevieve. "So, about tomorrow." Genevieve nodded, aware of Miss Caldwell's watchful gaze. "Thank you, that would be most kind." After Tucker left with his purchases and Miss Caldwell departed shortly after, Genevieve let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That's Victoria Caldwell," Mr. Peterson said without looking up from his ledger. "Her father owns the biggest cattle operation around these parts, and she's had her eye on Tucker Larson for years. Man's dodged that lasso so far, but she's persistent." Genevieve absorbed this information silently, telling herself it shouldn't matter to her who Tucker Larson did or didn't court. She had enough complications in her life without adding romantic entanglements. The remainder of the day passed uneventfully, and by the time Genevieve returned to the boarding house, she was exhausted but satisfied. She had employment, the prospect of a teaching position, and perhaps even the beginnings of a friendship with Tucker Larson. That night, as she fed James and prepared for bed, Genevieve allowed herself to think of the future. Maybe Buffalo could be more than just a stopping point. Maybe it could be home. But as she drifted off to sleep, the weight of her secret pressed upon her heart. Sooner or later, the truth would have to come out. And when it did, would the fragile foundation she was building crumble beneath her? The social at the church was a lively affair, with families from town and surrounding farms gathering to share food, music, and conversation. Genevieve, dressed in her blue dress once again, felt conspicuous as she entered with Tucker beside her and James in her arms. Conversations faltered momentarily, heads turned, and curious eyes followed their progress. "Don't mind them," Tucker murmured. "They're just not used to new faces." Genevieve nodded, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. She had attended plenty of social gatherings back in Pennsylvania, but never as an unwed mother, never with so much to hide. Mrs. Holloway approached, her face breaking into a welcoming smile. "There you are. Come, let me introduce you to some folks." With Mrs. Holloway's endorsement, Genevieve found herself cautiously accepted into conversations. The women cooed over James, asking his age and commenting on his dark eyes. The men were more reserved but polite, especially when Tucker remained nearby. Victoria Caldwell arrived fashionably late, on the arm of her father, a tall, imposing man with a silver mustache and cold eyes. She immediately sought out Tucker, drawing him away with a hand on his arm and a determined smile. "Don't worry about that, Mrs. Holloway said, noticing Genevieve's gaze following them. "Victoria's been trying to catch Tucker for years. Her father wants to combine their ranches, but Tucker's not one to be pushed into anything, especially marriage." "I wasn't worried," Genevieve said quickly, shifting James to her other arm. "Mr. Larson has been very kind to me, but I'm not looking for anything of that nature." Mrs. Holloway gave her a knowing look but didn't press the matter. Instead, she introduced Genevieve to the members of the town council, who listened with interest as she described her teaching experience. "We've been meaning to establish a proper school," said Mr. Hamilton, the town banker. "The children are making do with irregular lessons from whoever's available, but it's not ideal. I would be honored to help establish a structured educational program," Genevieve said earnestly. "Every child deserves the opportunity to learn, regardless of their circumstances." By the end of the evening, Genevieve had secured a meeting with the town council the following week to discuss the possibility of becoming Buffalo's schoolteacher. It was more than she had dared to hope for, and she felt a cautious optimism taking root. Tucker reappeared as the gathering was winding down, offering to walk her back to the boarding house. The night was clear, stars blazing in the vast Wyoming sky, and the spring air carried a hint of warmth. "You made quite an impression," Tucker said as they walked. "Everyone's talking about the educated Eastern lady who wants to teach our children." Genevieve smiled. "I hope so. Teaching is what I love, and I think I could do some good here." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sound the soft crunch of their boots on the dirt road and James's gentle breathing. "Can I ask you something, Miss Porter?" "Genevieve, please," she corrected. "And yes, you may." Tucker hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "What brings a young woman like yourself, with education and refinement, all the way out to Wyoming Territory? Alone with a baby?" The question was inevitable, and Genevieve had prepared an answer, a version of the truth that omitted the most damning details. "I found myself in difficult circumstances back east. After James was born, I decided we needed a fresh start, somewhere far away from painful memories." Tucker nodded slowly. "The West is good for fresh starts. Plenty of folks come here to leave something behind, including you." She asked, seizing the opportunity to shift the focus from her past. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I suppose so. My father was a no-good drunk who gambled away everything we had. When he died, I headed west with nothing but the clothes on my back and a determination to be nothing like him. Worked cattle drives, saved every penny, and eventually bought my own land." "That's admirable," Genevieve said sincerely. "Building something from nothing." "It's not much yet," Tucker admitted. "Larson Ranch is modest compared to the Caldwell spread, but it's growing. I've got good grazing land, a decent herd, and plans for more." They reached the boarding house, pausing at the bottom of the steps. Genevieve turned to face Tucker, James sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "For everything, really. You've been kinder than I had any right to expect." Tucker's eyes were serious in the moonlight. "Everyone deserves kindness, especially those starting over." There was something in his gaze that made her heart flutter, a warmth that had nothing to do with charity or pity. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to have someone like Tucker Larson in her life, a partner to share her burdens. But the moment passed, reality asserting itself once more. She had James to think of, a teaching position to secure, and a past that would eventually catch up with her. Romance was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Good night, Tucker," she said softly, turning toward the door. "Good night, Genevieve," he replied. "I'll see you at the council meeting on Monday." She nodded and slipped inside, leaning against the closed door as her composure threatened to crumble. James stirred against her, a reminder of why she had to be strong, why she had to keep her secrets and her heart closely guarded. The days passed quickly as Genevieve settled into a routine. Mornings and afternoons at the general store, evenings caring for James and preparing for her presentation to the town council. Mrs. Holloway proved to be an invaluable ally, offering to watch James when necessary and providing insights into the town's dynamics. "The Caldwells hold a lot of power around here," Mrs. Holloway explained one evening as they sat in the kitchen, Genevieve mending a tear in one of her dresses. "Josiah Caldwell came here 20 years ago and claimed the best grazing land. He's not opposed to using strong-arm tactics to get what he wants, whether it's water rights or business deals. And his daughter seems to want Tucker Larson," Genevieve observed, trying to keep her tone neutral. Mrs. Holloway snorted. "Victoria wants what her father wants, the Larson land. It sits right in the middle of what Caldwell considers his territory. Tucker's refused to sell, so now they're trying to get it through marriage." The thought of Tucker being pressured into marriage for business reasons bothered Genevieve more than she wanted to admit. "He doesn't seem the type to be manipulated." "He isn't," Mrs. Holloway agreed. "But Caldwell's a persistent man, and he doesn't like being thwarted. Tucker's been holding his ground, but it's made things difficult for him in town sometimes. Caldwell has influence with the bank, the merchants, even some members of the town council." This last piece of information gave Genevieve pause. "The council that's considering me for the teaching position," Mrs. Holloway patted her hand reassuringly. "Don't you worry about that. Education's one area where Caldwell doesn't meddle much. He sends Victoria's younger brothers to school back east, doesn't care much what the local children learn as long as it doesn't interfere with his interests." Still, as Monday approached, Genevieve couldn't help but worry. The teaching position represented stability, respectability, a future for her and James. If the Caldwells took a dislike to her because of her association with Tucker, would they use their influence against her? The council meeting was held in the back room of the town's only hotel, a space reserved for civic functions and occasional card games. Genevieve arrived early, dressed in her best, with a carefully prepared presentation outlining her qualifications and her vision for Buffalo's school. Mrs. Holloway had agreed to watch James, allowing Genevieve to focus fully on making her case. As she waited for the council members to arrive, she reviewed her notes, determined to present herself as the capable, committed teacher she knew she could be. The council consisted of 5 men: Mr. Hamilton from the bank, Sheriff Davis, Mr. Jenkins the blacksmith, Reverend Williams, and Dr. Morgan. They filed in, greeting her politely before taking their seats at the long table. To her surprise, several townspeople also entered, filling the chairs arranged along the walls. Among them was Tucker, who gave her an encouraging nod, and Victoria Caldwell, whose presence was unexpected and unsettling. Mr. Hamilton called the meeting to order, explaining that education was a matter of public interest, which was why the session was open to observers. He then invited Genevieve to present her case. Rising to her feet, Genevieve spoke clearly and confidently about her education at the normal school in Philadelphia, her 3 years of teaching experience, and her commitment to providing quality education to all children, regardless of background or circumstance. I believe in a curriculum that balances practical skills with academic knowledge, she explained. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, of course, but also history, geography, and natural sciences. Children in the West need to understand the world beyond their immediate surroundings, even as they learn the skills necessary for life on the frontier. The council members listened attentively, occasionally asking questions about her methods or expectations. Reverend Williams seemed particularly interested in her approach to moral education. "Would you include Bible readings in your lessons, Miss Porter?" he inquired. "I believe in teaching moral values," Genevieve replied carefully. "The Bible certainly contains valuable lessons, but I would also draw from other sources of wisdom and encourage children to think critically about ethical questions." This answer seemed to satisfy him, and the questions continued, ranging from discipline practices to how she would handle children of different ages and abilities in one classroom. Throughout the discussion, Genevieve was conscious of Victoria Caldwell's scrutiny. The woman's expression was unreadable, but there was a calculation in her gaze that made Genevieve uneasy. Finally, Mr. Hamilton asked the question she had been dreading. "Miss Porter, it's no secret that you're a single mother. While we appreciate your qualifications, some parents might have concerns about the example you set. How would you address those concerns?" A hush fell over the room. Genevieve felt heat rise to her cheeks but forced herself to meet Mr. Hamilton's gaze steadily. "I understand those concerns," she said, her voice calm despite her racing heart. "I would assure parents that my personal circumstances do not affect my ability to teach their children or to instill proper values. I believe in honesty, hard work, and treating others with respect and kindness. Those are the values I would model and teach." Before Mr. Hamilton could respond, Victoria Caldwell stood up. "If I may," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room, "I think we're overlooking an important question. Miss Porter hasn't explained the circumstances of her child's birth, or why she's come all the way to Wyoming alone. Before entrusting our children to her, shouldn't we know more about her character?" Murmurs rippled through the assembled observers. Genevieve's hands trembled, but she clasped them tightly in front of her, refusing to show her distress. Sheriff Davis frowned at Victoria. "Miss Caldwell, this isn't a trial. We're considering Miss Porter's qualifications as a teacher, not passing judgment on her personal life." "But character is relevant to teaching, isn't it?" Victoria pressed. "Children learn by example. What example does an unwed mother set?" Tucker stood up abruptly. "That's enough, Victoria. Miss Porter's qualifications speak for themselves. She's educated, experienced, and willing to take on a challenging role that this town desperately needs filled." Victoria turned to him, eyes flashing. "I'm surprised at you, Tucker. I would have thought you'd be more concerned about the moral education of Buffalo's children." "I am," he replied firmly. "That's why I support Miss Porter's application. She's the most qualified person we've had offered to teach our children, and her personal circumstances have no bearing on that fact." The tension in the room was palpable. Genevieve felt caught in a current beyond her control, her carefully constructed plans threatening to unravel. She had known this moment would come, had prepared for it, but facing it now, with so much at stake, was harder than she had anticipated. Mr. Hamilton cleared his throat. "I think we've heard enough. Miss Porter, thank you for your presentation. The council will discuss the matter privately and inform you of our decision." Genevieve nodded, gathering her papers with hands that still trembled slightly. "Thank you for your consideration," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. As she left the meeting room, Tucker followed her out into the hotel corridor. "I apologize for Victoria's behavior," he said quietly. "That was uncalled for." "It was to be expected," Genevieve replied, straightening her shoulders. "I knew my situation would raise questions." Tucker's expression was troubled. "It shouldn't matter. What matters is that you're a good teacher who wants to help our community." "Not everyone sees it that way," she said, offering him a small smile. "But thank you for standing up for me. It means a great deal." He hesitated, then said, "Whatever the council decides, I want you to know that you have allies here. Mrs. Holloway thinks the world of you. Mr. Peterson says you're the best assistant he's ever had, and He paused. "I believe in you, Genevieve." The sincerity in his voice threatened to undo her composure. "Thank you, Tucker. I should go back to James now." He nodded, watching her as she walked away, her back straight and her head held high despite the weight pressing on her heart. The next day was agony as Genevieve waited for the council's decision. She went about her duties at the general store, checked figures, organized inventory, and helped customers with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Peterson, normally taciturn, made an effort to reassure her. "Don't you worry about those councilmen," he said gruffly. "They know a good thing when they see it, Victoria Caldwell notwithstanding." It was late afternoon when Mr. Hamilton entered the store. He nodded to Mr. Peterson before approaching Genevieve's desk. "Miss Porter," he said formally. "The council has reached a decision regarding the teaching position." Genevieve set down her pen, heart pounding. "Yes, Mr. Hamilton, we would like to offer you the position with a few conditions." He handed her an envelope. "This contains our formal offer and the terms we've agreed upon." The school term would begin in September, giving you the summer to prepare curriculum and allow us time to ready the old claim office as a schoolhouse. Relief washed over her, so intense she nearly swayed in her chair. "Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I'm very grateful for the opportunity." He nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Your qualifications are impressive, Miss Porter, and we believe you'll be an asset to our community. However," he added, his tone growing more serious, "we do ask that your conduct be above reproach. Teaching children is a position of trust, and the community will be watching closely." "I understand," Genevieve said, accepting the envelope. "I will do my utmost to justify your faith in me." After Mr. Hamilton left, Genevieve opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The salary was modest but fair, and the conditions were, as she expected, strict moral conduct, regular reports to the council, and a 3-month probationary period. Mr. Peterson emerged from behind the counter, a rare smile breaking through his weathered features. "Congratulations, teacher," he said. "You earned it." "Thank you," she replied, still dazed by the sudden turn in her fortunes. "I'll still work for you until the school term begins, of course." He waved a hand dismissively. "I knew this was coming." "Already got my niece coming to take your place in a few weeks. You'll need time to get that schoolhouse in order." The news spread quickly through Buffalo. By the time Genevieve returned to the boarding house that evening, Mrs. Holloway had prepared a small celebration dinner, and several of the other boarders offered their congratulations. Even James seemed to sense the occasion, cooing and smiling more than usual as he was passed from one admiring set of arms to another. Later, as Genevieve sat by the window in her room, watching the stars emerge over the Wyoming landscape, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Tucker standing there, hat in hand, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses in the other. "I thought a celebration might be in order," he said, smiling. Mrs. Holloway gave her permission for me to come up, proper as can be with the door open. Genevieve laughed, gesturing for him to enter. I think we can risk the scandal, especially since I'm now officially respectable as the town's schoolteacher. They sat by the window, speaking softly so as not to wake James, who slept peacefully in his makeshift crib. Tucker poured the wine, a luxury Genevieve hadn't indulged in since before James was born. To Buffalo's new schoolmarm, Tucker said, raising his glass. May she shape the minds of our youth and ignore the wagging tongues of our gossips. Genevieve clinked her glass against his, taking a small sip of the sweet red wine. Thank you again for your support yesterday. I don't think I would have gotten the position without it. You would have, he assured her. Your qualifications spoke for themselves. I just couldn't stand by and let Victoria turn it into a moral inquisition. They fell into easy conversation, talking about the school, his ranch, the changing seasons, and a dozen other topics. With Tucker, Genevieve found herself relaxing, laughing more freely than she had in months. He had a way of making her feel safe, accepted despite her circumstances. As the evening wore on, however, the weight of her secret pressed more heavily upon her conscience. Here was a good man, offering friendship and perhaps something more, and she was keeping the truth from him. Tucker, she said finally, setting down her empty glass, there's something I should tell you. His expression grew serious. You don't owe me any explanations, Genevieve. I know, she said softly, but I want to tell you. You've been kind to me, kinder than anyone has been in a long time, and I don't want to. I don't want there to be lies between us. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes steady on hers. All right then, I'm listening. Genevieve took a deep breath. James isn't my son. Tucker's brow furrowed in confusion. I don't understand. He's my sister's child, Genevieve continued, the words coming faster now that she had begun. My younger sister, Margaret. She was 17 when she fell in love with a man who promised her the world and then abandoned her when he discovered she was with child. Our parents were strict, unforgiving. They would have cast her out, disowned her completely. So you took the blame, Tucker said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Genevieve nodded, tears threatening. We concocted a story. I had been teaching in another town, so no one knew I hadn't been, in a delicate condition. I returned home, claiming I had been secretly married and then widowed. Margaret went to stay with an aunt, supposedly to help with her illness. When James was born, I claimed him as mine, a widow's son. And your sister, where is she now? Genevieve looked away, the pain still fresh. She died shortly after James was born. Childbed fever. Her last wish was for me to raise him as my own, to give him the love and opportunities she couldn't. Tucker was silent for a long moment. Genevieve couldn't bring herself to look at him, afraid of what she might see in his eyes, judgment, disappointment, or worst of all, pity. So you left, he said finally. Started over somewhere no one knew your story. Yes, she whispered. I couldn't stay there with the gossip and the judgment, knowing that the truth was even more complicated than they imagined. And I wanted James to have a fresh start, a place where he could grow up without the shadow of scandal. She risked a glance at Tucker then, surprised to find not condemnation but a deep compassion in his gaze. Thank you for telling me, he said quietly. It can't have been easy carrying that burden alone. It isn't easy, she admitted. Every day I look at him and see Margaret. I love him as if he were my own. He is my own, in all the ways that matter, but sometimes the grief is overwhelming. Tucker reached across the small table, covering her hand with his. You're a remarkable woman, Genevieve Porter. What you've done for your sister, for James. It takes exceptional courage and love. His words, so unexpected, broke the dam of emotion she had been holding back. Tears spilled down her cheeks and she covered her face with her free hand. "I'm sorry," she managed between sobs. "I didn't mean to." Tucker moved to kneel beside her chair, gently drawing her hands away from her face. "Don't apologize," he said firmly. "You have nothing to be sorry for." In that moment, looking into his eyes, Genevieve felt a connection she had never experienced before, a recognition of something rare and precious between them. Without thinking, she leaned forward, and his lips met hers in a kiss so tender it made her heart ache. When they broke apart, Tucker remained close, his forehead resting against hers. "I should go," he said softly. "Before Mrs. Holloway decides I've compromised your reputation beyond repair." Genevieve smiled through her tears. "Yes, you should." He stood reluctantly. "Will you have dinner with me tomorrow at my ranch? I'd like you to see it and we could talk more about everything." "I'd like that," she replied. "Very much." After Tucker left, Genevieve moved to the small crib where James slept peacefully, unaware of the momentous conversation that had just transpired. She stroked his dark hair, her heart full of love for this child who had become the center of her world. "I think we might have found our place, little one," she whispered, "and perhaps someone who could love us both, just as we are." The next day passed in a blur of anticipation. Genevieve found it difficult to concentrate on her work, her mind repeatedly drifting to the evening ahead. Mr. Peterson noticed her distraction, but said nothing, simply giving her less demanding tasks for the day. Tucker arrived at the boarding house promptly at 5 o'clock, driving a well-maintained buggy pulled by a handsome bay horse. Mrs. Holloway watched from the porch, her expression a mixture of approval and caution as Genevieve settled James in her lap and accepted Tucker's hand to climb aboard. "Have her back at a decent hour, Mr. Larson," the older woman called. "Teacher or not, Miss Porter's still under my roof and I run a respectable house." Tucker tipped his hat to her. "Yes, madam, you have my word." The ride to the Larson ranch took them south of town, along a well-worn trail that wound through rolling grasslands dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, and the air was filled with the scent of spring growth and distant rain. "It's beautiful out here," Genevieve said, holding James securely as the buggy swayed gently over the uneven ground. "So open and free." Tucker nodded, pride evident in his voice as he replied, "That's what drew me to this part of Wyoming. The land has a way of speaking to a person, if you're willing to listen." They crested a small rise, and suddenly the ranch spread out before them, a modest but well-built house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, corrals, and beyond them, cattle grazing on the lush spring grass. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided welcome shade. "It's not much compared to the Caldwell spread," Tucker said, a hint of self-consciousness in his tone. "But it's growing. I've added 50 acres last year and I'm hoping to expand the herd this summer." "It's wonderful," Genevieve said sincerely. "You've built something real here, something lasting." His smile in response was warm, grateful for her understanding of what the ranch represented, not just a business, but a dream realized through hard work and determination. As they approached the house, a man emerged from one of the outbuildings, tall and lean, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of years under the Wyoming sun. "That's Hank," Tucker explained. "My foreman and right-hand man. Been with me since I bought this place. He lives in the bunkhouse with the other hands, but he's more like family than an employee." Hank approached as Tucker brought the buggy to a halt in front of the house. He tipped his hat to Genevieve, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at James. "Miss Porter, this is Hank Morgan." "Hank, Miss Genevieve Porter and her son, James." "Pleasure to meet you, madam," Hank said, his voice gruff but kind. Boss has been talking about you something fierce these past days. Tucker cleared his throat, shooting Hank a warning look that the older man ignored with a grin. Supper ready, Hank. Rosa's just about finished, said to bring you in when you arrived. Rosa? Genevieve inquired as Tucker helped her down from the buggy. Hank's wife, Tucker explained. She keeps house for me and cooks like an angel. They've been with me for 5 years now, and I'd be lost without them. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, not luxurious, but clean, well-furnished, and welcoming. The main room featured a large stone fireplace, sturdy wooden furniture softened by colorful quilts, and bookshelves filled with volumes that suggested Tucker was more well-read than his cowboy demeanor might indicate. Rosa Morgan was a small, energetic woman with dark hair streaked with silver and warm brown eyes that missed nothing. She welcomed Genevieve with genuine hospitality, immediately fussing over James and insisting on holding him while Genevieve and Tucker washed up for dinner. The meal was delicious roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread and vegetables from Rosa's garden, followed by apple pie still warm from the oven. Conversation flowed easily, with Hank sharing amusing stories about the early days of the ranch, and Rosa proudly showing off the latest additions to her vegetable garden. After dinner, Hank and Rosa tactfully retreated to their quarters in a small cabin near the bunkhouse, leaving Tucker and Genevieve alone with a sleeping James. "Would you like to see the rest of the house?" Tucker asked. "It's not much, but I've tried to make it a proper home, not just a place to sleep between cattle drives." He showed her the small study where he kept the ranch accounts, the kitchen with its large wood-burning stove and well-stocked pantry, and finally, somewhat hesitantly, the 2 bedrooms upstairs. "This one's mine," he said, opening a door to reveal a simple but comfortable room with a large bed, dresser, and a window that looked out over the ranch. "And this," he continued, moving to the next door, "I've been fixing up, thinking someday." He trailed off, but Genevieve understood. It was a room meant for children, a future, a family. The realization sent a flutter of something like hope through her chest. They returned downstairs, settling on the porch to watch the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. James slept peacefully in Genevieve's arms, his little face relaxed in complete trust. "I've been thinking about what you told me," Tucker said after a comfortable silence. "About James and your sister." Genevieve tensed slightly. "Yes. It doesn't change how I feel about you," he said simply. "If anything, it makes me admire you more. What you did for your sister, what you're doing for James. It shows your true character far more than any circumstance of birth or marital status." Relief washed over her. "Thank you. I've been afraid. So afraid of what would happen if people knew the truth. They might try to take him from me, saying I have no right to him." Tucker's expression grew serious. "No one is going to take him from you, not while I have anything to say about it." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her heart swell. "Tucker, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied, reaching out to take her free hand in his. "Just know that you're not alone anymore, Genevieve. Whatever comes, you have me in your corner." The intensity in his gaze made it difficult to breathe. Genevieve was acutely aware of the warmth of his hand around hers, the solid strength of his presence beside her, the unspoken promise in his words. "It's getting late," she said softly. "We should probably head back before Mrs. Holloway sends the sheriff after us." Tucker nodded, reluctantly releasing her hand. "You're right. Can't have Buffalo's new teacher causing a scandal before she even starts the job." The ride back to town was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. The stars were out in full force, the Milky Way a brilliant swath across the night sky, and the air had cooled, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. As they approached the boarding house, Genevieve finally broke the silence. "Thank you for tonight, for dinner, for showing me your home, for understanding." Tucker brought the buggy to a halt in front of the boarding house, where a lamp still burned in the front window. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," he replied, "and for giving me the most enjoyable evening I've had in longer than I can remember." He helped her down from the buggy, careful not to disturb the sleeping James, and walked her to the door. Mrs. Holloway opened it before they could knock, her expression carefully neutral despite the curiosity evident in her eyes. "Right on time, Mr. Larson," she said approvingly. "I was just about to lock up for the night." Tucker tipped his hat to her. "Wouldn't dream of keeping Miss Porter out too late, madam. Good night to you both." As Genevieve turned to enter, Tucker caught her hand briefly, giving it a gentle squeeze. The touch lingered, a promise of something more to come, and she carried the warmth of it with her as she climbed the stairs to her room. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity as Genevieve began preparations for the school term. The town council had allocated funds to renovate the old claim office, transforming it into a proper schoolhouse with desks, a blackboard, and bookshelves. Genevieve threw herself into the project, designing the layout, ordering supplies, and developing curriculum for students ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Tucker was often by her side, helping with repairs to the building, building shelves and desks, and offering encouragement when the task seemed overwhelming. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, growing from friendship into something more profound, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and an increasingly undeniable attraction. The town noticed, of course. Whispers followed them, some approving, others less so. Victoria Caldwell made her disapproval clear, her cold glances and pointed remarks a constant reminder of the social barriers Genevieve still faced. One afternoon in late June, as Genevieve was arranging books on the newly installed shelves in the schoolhouse, Victoria appeared in the doorway, her elegant dress and perfect coiffure starkly out of place in the simple room. "Miss Porter," she said coolly. "Hard at work, I see." Genevieve straightened, forcing a polite smile. "Miss Caldwell, can I help you with something?" Victoria stepped into the room, her gaze sweeping over the modest furnishings with barely concealed disdain. "I wanted to see the school everyone is talking about. Father is considering making a donation, you know. Books, perhaps, or a bell for the roof." "That would be very generous," Genevieve replied cautiously. Victoria moved closer, examining the books Genevieve had been arranging. McGuffey's Readers, Arithmetic Primers, all very basic. "I had private tutors growing up, of course. Father believes in the best education money can buy." "Not everyone has that privilege," Genevieve said, struggling to maintain her composure. "But every child deserves the opportunity to learn." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "A noble sentiment." "Speaking of children, where is your little boy today? Usually he's attached to your hip, or to Tucker Larson's." The barb was deliberate, and Genevieve felt her cheeks flush. "James is with Mrs. Holloway. She's been kind enough to watch him while I work." "How convenient," Victoria murmured. "Tell me, Miss Porter, what are your intentions regarding Tucker?" The directness of the question took Genevieve aback. "I'm not sure that's any of your concern, Miss Caldwell." "Oh, but it is," Victoria replied, her voice hardening. "Tucker Larson is an important man in this community with a promising future. He deserves better than to be saddled with another man's child and a woman of questionable reputation." Anger flared within Genevieve, hot and swift. "Mr. Larson is quite capable of deciding what he deserves, Miss Caldwell. And my reputation is no longer in question, now that the town council has entrusted me with educating Buffalo's children." Victoria's eyes narrowed. Don't be naive. They accepted you because there was no better option available, not because they've forgotten your circumstances. And as for Tucker, men can be easily led astray by a pretty face and a sad story, but eventually they come to their senses. Before Genevieve could respond, a deep voice from the doorway interrupted. That's enough, Victoria. Both women turned to find Tucker standing there, his expression thunderous. Victoria's demeanor instantly changed, a simpering smile replacing her cold glare. Tucker, darling. I was just discussing educational philosophy with Miss Porter. Father is considering a donation to the school. I heard what you were discussing, Tucker said flatly, and I don't appreciate it. Victoria's smile faltered. I was only concerned for your well-being. You know how people talk. Let them talk, Tucker replied, moving to stand beside Genevieve. And if your father wants to donate to the school, he can discuss it with the town council. Now, if you'll excuse us, Miss Porter and I have work to finish. For a moment, Victoria looked as if she might argue further, but something in Tucker's expression made her reconsider. With a stiff nod, she turned and left, her departure as dramatic as her entrance had been. When she was gone, Tucker turned to Genevieve, his expression softening. I'm sorry about that. Victoria can be difficult. She was only saying what many are thinking, Genevieve replied, trying to steady her voice. She's right about one thing, Tucker. Your reputation in this town matters. Being associated with me could damage it. Tucker shook his head firmly. I don't give a damn about what Victoria Caldwell or anyone else thinks. The only opinions that matter to me are those of people who judge a person by their actions and their character, not by circumstances they can't control. He took her hands in his grip warm and reassuring. Genevieve, I need you to understand something. I'm not spending time with you out of pity or charity. I'm with you because there's no one else I'd rather be with. You're intelligent, kind, brave, and stronger than anyone I've ever known. James is lucky to have you as his mother and I. He paused, his eyes searching hers. I'd be honored if you'd consider a future with me. Genevieve's heart seemed to stop. Tucker, are you? I'm not proposing, not yet, he clarified quickly. That would be rushing things, and you deserve better than that. But I want you to know that's where my mind is heading. I care for you, Genevieve, deeply. And I care for James too. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. I care for you too, she whispered. More than I thought possible. Tucker smiled, the tension leaving his shoulders. Then that's all that matters. The rest will work itself out in time. He leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both tender and filled with promise. When they parted, Genevieve felt a sense of rightness, as if the scattered pieces of her life were finally falling into place. The summer passed in a haze of work and increasingly stolen moments with Tucker. The schoolhouse took shape, books and supplies arrived, and word spread throughout the surrounding area about the new school opening in Buffalo. Genevieve received inquiries from families living on distant ranches, asking if their children could board in town during the school term. James grew rapidly, his babbling turning into recognizable sounds that might soon become words. He adored Tucker, reaching for him eagerly whenever he appeared, and the sight of the strong cowboy cradling the small boy never failed to make Genevieve's heart swell with emotion. By August, the school was ready, and Genevieve had enrolled 28 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old. The town had come together to support the endeavor, with families donating books, supplies, and even a bell for the schoolhouse roof, courtesy of the Caldwells, who couldn't resist the opportunity to demonstrate their largesse despite Victoria's continued cold treatment of Genevieve. One evening in late August, just a week before school was to begin, Tucker invited Genevieve for a special dinner at his ranch. Mrs. Holloway, who had become increasingly supportive of their relationship, agreed to watch James for the night. "Take your time," she said with a knowing smile as Genevieve prepared to leave. "James and I will be just fine. He's sleeping through the night now anyway." The ranch looked different in the warm light of the setting sun. The house adorned with flowers from Rosa's garden, the table on the porch set for two with the Morgans' best china and silverware. Tucker had clearly gone to great lengths to make the evening special. After a delicious dinner, during which Tucker seemed unusually nervous, he suggested a walk to the creek. The night was perfect warm with a gentle breeze, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and the sound of water flowing over rocks creating a soothing backdrop. They stood on the bank of the creek, watching the water catch the last light of day when Tucker suddenly turned to face her. "Genevieve," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "These past months have been the happiest of my life. Getting to know you, watching you with James, seeing your determination to build something good here in Buffalo. It's made me realize what I want for my future." He took her hands in his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "I love you, Genevieve Porter. I love your strength, your kindness, your courage. I love the way you are with James, the way you stand up for what you believe in, the way you faced every challenge with your head held high." Tears welled in her eyes as he continued, dropping to one knee before her. "I want to build a life with you, with James. I want to be there for both of you, to protect you, to share in your joys and help shoulder your sorrows. Genevieve, will you marry me?" For a moment she couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion. Then, through her tears, she managed to whisper, "Yes." "Oh, Tucker, yes." He rose to his feet, pulling her into his arms and kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, he reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. "It was my mother's," he explained, opening it to reveal a simple but beautiful gold band set with a small diamond. "She made my father promise it would go to the woman I truly loved, not just someone I married for convenience or obligation." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Genevieve felt a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. After all the hardship, the fear, the uncertainty, she had found not just safety but love, a man who accepted her past, embraced her present, and wanted to share her future. "I never thought I would find this," she admitted softly. "After everything that happened, I thought my only purpose would be raising James, giving him the life Margaret couldn't." Tucker cupped her face gently. "You deserve happiness too, Genevieve. And I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to give it to you." They returned to the ranch house hand in hand, where Rosa and Hank were waiting anxiously. One look at their glowing faces told the story, and Rosa burst into tears of joy while Hank clapped Tucker on the back with gruff congratulations. "When's the wedding to be?" Rosa asked, already planning in her practical way. Tucker looked to Genevieve, leaving the decision to her. "I was thinking perhaps after the school term starts," she suggested. "Once I've settled into teaching. Maybe early October." "Perfect," Tucker agreed. "That gives us just enough time to plan and for word to reach my brother in Colorado. He'd never forgive me if he missed the wedding." The news of their engagement spread through Buffalo like wildfire. Most reactions were positive. Mrs. Holloway cried happy tears. Mr. Peterson offered a rare smile and a bottle of his best whiskey, and many townspeople stopped Genevieve in the street to offer congratulations. Victoria Caldwell's reaction was coldly civil, her father's more calculating. Josiah Caldwell appeared at the ranch the day after the announcement, ostensibly to offer congratulations but really to discuss business. "Marriage changes a man's perspective," he told Tucker as they stood on the porch, watching Genevieve and James in the garden with Rosa. Makes him think more about the future, about security. My offer to buy your land still stands, Larson. With a wife and child to think of now, might be wise to consider it. Tucker's response was firm. I appreciate the thought, Caldwell, but my plans haven't changed. If anything, I'm more determined than ever to build something here, something I can pass on to James and any other children Genevieve and I might have. Caldwell's expression hardened slightly. Just remember, my offer won't last forever. Land's getting more valuable around here. What with the railroad coming through next year? Think about what's best for your family. The implied slight didn't escape Tucker's notice, but he let it pass, unwilling to let Caldwell's pettiness taint his happiness. The first day of school arrived with perfect weather and high excitement. Students from town and surrounding ranches filled the schoolhouse, their faces a mixture of curiosity, anticipation, and in some cases, reluctance. Genevieve stood at the front of the room, heart racing but voice steady as she welcomed them to the first official day of Buffalo school. James sat in a small pen Tucker had built in the corner of the room, contentedly playing with wooden blocks while Genevieve began the process of assessing each student's level of education and dividing them into appropriate groups. By the end of the day, she was exhausted but exhilarated. The children had responded well to her gentle but firm approach, and she had already identified several who showed particular promise: a shy girl with a gift for mathematics, a boy who read far beyond his years, twins who absorbed information like sponges. As she was locking up the schoolhouse, Tucker appeared on horseback, leading a second mount. Thought you might enjoy a ride, he called. Rosa's watching James at the ranch. She says he's been asking for Ma all day. He's not talking yet, Genevieve laughed, but her heart swelled at the thought. The ride to the ranch was peaceful, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grassland. Genevieve shared stories of her first day, and Tucker listened attentively, his pride in her accomplishments evident in his eyes. When they reached the ranch, James was indeed waiting eagerly, held in Rosa's capable arms. As soon as he saw Genevieve, he stretched out his small hands, a look of delight on his face. Ma, he said clearly, the first real word he had spoken. Genevieve froze, tears springing to her eyes. She gathered him into her arms, holding him close as emotion overwhelmed her. Yes, my darling, she whispered. Mama's here. Later, after James had been put to bed in the small room Tucker had prepared for him, Genevieve sat on the porch with Tucker, watching the stars emerge. He called me Mama, she said softly. I never thought. I mean, I've always been his aunt, really, but now. You are his mother, Tucker said firmly. In every way that matters, and soon legally too. I've been talking to Judge Wilson about adoption papers to be filed after we're married. James will be a Larson just like you. Genevieve turned to him, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. Tucker, I don't know what to say. Say you'll marry me as soon as possible, he replied with a smile. I'm finding it harder and harder to leave you at the boarding house each night. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of teaching, planning, and savoring quiet moments with Tucker and James. The town embraced the coming celebration, with many contributing to make it special. Mrs. Holloway and her boarders sewed Genevieve a simple but elegant wedding dress. The Reverend Williams offered the church at no charge, and families of Genevieve's students arranged to provide food for the reception. Even Victoria Caldwell seemed to have accepted the inevitable, her hostility fading to a cool indifference. Her father, however, maintained his campaign to acquire the Larson ranch, his offers becoming more insistent as the wedding approached. He's getting desperate, Tucker observed after Caldwell's latest visit. Something's changed. He wants this land more than ever. The mystery was solved a week before the wedding when news arrived that the railroad's planned route would pass directly through the eastern edge of Tucker's property. The information had been kept confidential, but Caldwell, with his connections, had somehow learned of it early and had been trying to purchase the land before Tucker discovered its increased value. That old snake, Hank fumed when Tucker shared the news. Trying to cheat you out of a fortune. Tucker was more philosophical. It's just business to him. But for us, it's an opportunity. The railroad will pay good money for the right-of-way, and having the tracks so close will make it easier to ship our cattle to market. The news added another layer of joy to the anticipation of the wedding. The railroad money would provide security for their future, allowing Tucker to expand the ranch and giving Genevieve the means to improve the school further. The day before the wedding, as Genevieve was making final preparations at the boarding house, Mrs. Holloway appeared at her door with a letter. "This just came for you," she said, handing over the envelope with a curious expression. "From back east, by the looks of it." Genevieve's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the handwriting, her mother's neat, precise script. She hadn't written to her parents since arriving in Buffalo, unsure if they would want to hear from her after the scandal and her abrupt departure. With trembling fingers, she opened the letter. "My dearest Genevieve," it began, "your father and I have only just learned of your whereabouts through a chance encounter with a former neighbor who received a letter from his cousin in Wyoming Territory. He mentioned a new schoolteacher named Porter with a young son, and we dared to hope it might be you. I cannot express the depth of our regret for how we handled Margaret's situation and yours. Pride and fear of what others might think led us to make terrible mistakes, hurting both our daughters when we should have offered nothing but love and support. We have lost one daughter forever. Please do not let our failings cost us another, and our grandson as well. If you can find it in your heart to forgive us, we would dearly love to hear from you, to know about your life and about Margaret's child." The letter continued, expressing remorse and a desperate hope for reconciliation. By the time Genevieve finished reading, tears were streaming down her face. "Bad news?" Mrs. Holloway asked gently. "No," Genevieve managed through her tears. "No, it's a chance to heal something I thought was broken forever." That evening, she shared the letter with Tucker as they sat by the creek, their special place. "I want to write back," she said. "To tell them about James, about you, about our life here." "I think that's a good idea," Tucker replied. "Family is important even when they make mistakes, and James should know his grandparents if they're willing to be part of his life." Genevieve leaned against his shoulder, grateful for his understanding. "I never imagined my life could turn out this way," she admitted. "When I left Pennsylvania, I was so afraid, so alone. All I wanted was to find a safe place for James to grow up. I never expected to find love, or a real home, or a community that would accept us." Tucker's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes life gives us more than we dare to hope for." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the October air crisp but not cold, the mountains in the distance outlined sharply against the blue sky. The church was decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons, the pews filled with townspeople, ranch hands, students and their families, and Tucker's brother David, who had arrived from Colorado the day before. Genevieve prepared in Mrs. Holloway's bedroom, the older woman helping her into the ivory dress with its modest lace trim and arranging her auburn hair in a simple but elegant style adorned with small white flowers. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Holloway said, blinking back tears. "Tucker Larson is a lucky man." James, now nearly a year old and walking with uncertain steps, was dressed in a miniature suit that matched Tucker's. He would be carried down the aisle by Mrs. Holloway, playing his own special role in the ceremony. As the time approached, Genevieve felt a strange calm settle over her. There were no last-minute doubts, no fear, only a deep certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Mr. Peterson, who had become something of a father figure to her during her time in Buffalo, had agreed to walk her down the aisle. He waited at the bottom of the stairs, unusually smart in a dark suit, his gruff manner softened by the occasion. "Ready, teacher?" he asked, offering his arm. "More than ready," she replied, taking it with a grateful smile. The small church was packed. Every face turned toward the door as the music began. A simple melody played on the church's aging organ. Mrs. Holloway entered first, carrying James, who gazed around with wide-eyed fascination at the gathered crowd. Then it was Genevieve's turn. As she stepped through the doorway on Mr. Peterson's arm, her eyes found Tucker immediately. He stood at the altar beside Reverend Williams, handsome in his dark suit, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awestruck joy as he saw her. The walk down the aisle seemed both endless and over in an instant. When Mr. Peterson placed her hand in Tucker's, whispering a gruff "take care of her" before stepping aside, Genevieve felt the last piece of her heart click into place. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days, through good times and bad, sickness and health. When Tucker slipped the wedding band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "By the authority vested in me," Reverend Williams said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Larson, you may kiss your bride." Tucker's kiss was gentle yet filled with promise, a pledge of all they would share in the years to come. When they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Tucker Larson, the applause was deafening. The reception was held in the town square, tables laden with food contributed by families throughout Buffalo, music provided by local musicians, and dancing continuing well into the evening. James was passed from one admiring set of arms to another, thoroughly enjoying being the center of attention, his dark eyes bright with excitement. As the celebration continued around them, Tucker pulled Genevieve aside for a moment of quiet. They stood in the shadow of the schoolhouse, the sounds of music and laughter a pleasant backdrop to their private conversation. "Happy, Mrs. Larson?" Tucker asked, his fingers laced through hers. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "It feels like a dream." "It's real," he assured her, his lips brushing her forehead. "And it's just the beginning." Later, as they prepared to leave for the ranch, their home now, not just Tucker's, Genevieve gathered James into her arms one last time. The child was heavy-eyed with exhaustion after the excitement of the day, his head resting trustingly on her shoulder. "Say goodnight to everyone, James," she murmured. "We're going home." Mrs. Holloway approached, ready to take James for the night as planned. The original arrangement had been for him to stay with her, while Tucker and Genevieve spent their wedding night alone, but suddenly Genevieve was reluctant to let him go. Sensing her hesitation, Tucker placed a hand on her shoulder. "He should come with us," he said softly. "Our first night as a family should include all of us." Gratitude welled in Genevieve's heart at his understanding. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Tucker replied. "There'll be plenty of time for us. Tonight, let's take our son home." They left amid cheers and well wishes, climbing into the buggy Tucker had decorated with ribbons and flowers for the occasion. As they drove through town toward the ranch, James sleeping peacefully between them, Genevieve felt a sense of completion unlike anything she had ever known. The ranch house was lit with lanterns, Rosa having prepared it for their arrival before joining the celebration in town. A fire burned in the hearth, warming the main room, and fresh flowers adorned every surface. Tucker carried the sleeping James upstairs to the small room that was now officially his, laying him gently in the crib and standing with Genevieve to watch him for a moment, their hearts full of love for this child who had brought them together. When they finally retired to their own room, their room now, not just Tucker's, the weight of the day's emotions caught up with Genevieve. As Tucker held her close, she found herself overwhelmed by all they had overcome to reach this moment. "I never thought I would have this," she whispered against his chest. "A husband, a home, a future without fear." Tucker's arms tightened around her. "You deserve it all, Genevieve, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that again." Their kiss deepened, passion mingling with tenderness as they began their life together as husband and wife. The years that followed brought changes to Buffalo and to the Larson family. The railroad arrived as promised, bringing growth and prosperity to the town. Tucker used the payment for the right-of-way to expand the ranch, building a larger house with room for their growing family. For Genevieve had given birth to a son they named Thomas David Larson, just over a year after their wedding. The school flourished under Genevieve's guidance, eventually requiring a larger building and additional teachers as Buffalo's population grew. Her parents visited when Thomas was born, a tentative reconciliation that strengthened over time as they came to terms with the past and embraced their role as grandparents to both James and Thomas. James grew into a thoughtful, intelligent boy with his mother Margaret's dark eyes and quiet determination. When he was old enough to understand, Genevieve and Tucker told him the truth about his birth, assuring him that he was loved beyond measure, both for himself and as a living connection to the aunt he would never know. "But you're my real mother," he said with the simple clarity of a child. "And Pa is my real father. That's what matters." Victoria Caldwell eventually married a railroad executive and moved to Denver, her father's ambitions fulfilled through a different alliance than the one he had envisioned with Tucker. The Caldwell and Larson ranches remained neighbors, their relationship cordial if not warm, bound by the shared interests of the community they both called home. On a summer evening 5 years after their wedding, Genevieve and Tucker sat on the porch of their home, watching James and Thomas playing with the family dog in the yard. Genevieve's hand rested on her swollen belly, their third child due to arrive before the first snow. "What are you thinking about?" Tucker asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "Everything," she replied with a smile. "How different my life is from what I expected, how grateful I am for every part of it, even the painful beginnings." Tucker reached over to take her hand. "Any regrets?" Genevieve shook her head, watching as James helped his younger brother climb onto the wooden horse Tucker had carved for him. "Not one," she said softly. "Every step, every choice led me here to you and our family. How could I regret any of it?" Tucker's thumb traced the wedding band on her finger, his expression thoughtful. "Remember that day when you finally told me the truth about James? You were so afraid I would think less of you." "I remember," she said. "I was terrified of losing what we were building together. And then I told you it didn't matter, that the baby would be mine when you became my wife." Genevieve smiled at the memory. "You did, and you've kept that promise in every way that matters." Tucker leaned over to kiss her gently. "Best decision I ever made," he murmured against her lips. "Loving you, loving our boys, building this life together." As the sun set over the Wyoming landscape, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Genevieve Larson looked at her husband, at their sons, at the home they had created together. and knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged. The baby that wasn't hers had led her to the man who would love them both, and together they had built a family bound not by blood alone, but by choice, by commitment, and by a love strong enough to overcome any obstacle. It was more than she had ever dared to dream, and she would treasure it for all the days of her life.